Okay, a very warm welcome to everyone who's found their way into our talk room in the festival headquarters, and also to everyone who's joining us on our multiple streaming platforms, as well on our Facebook page, as well as in our virtual festival headquarters, which I invite everyone to visit later on. Last year, when the world seemed still to be relatively okay, as compared to maybe this year, Finland was our guest country, when we had a great collaboration and cooperation with the Finnland-Institut in Berlin to present to the Viennese audience a view into the Finnish design scene. And something that we are truly very excited about is that this presence as a guest country of Vienna Design Week has, in a very explicit manner, found a long-term effect. And that effect was the opportunity we took to convene this great panel that you'll be able to listen to later today. Namely, that is that in Schloss Holleneck in Styria, the Finnland-Institut, together with Alice Lichtenstein, formed a design residency, which was to be filled with a Finnish designer. We took this opportunity to invite a couple of people to talk about design residencies and residencies in general. I don't want to go on about and take anything away from the discussion of the panel. So let me just introduce to you our moderator today, who is Philipp Rossmann, who is an author and columnist at Metropole magazine, one of our media partners, who has very kindly agreed to moderate this panel. And he will in turn introduce the other panelists. Thank you very much, and I hope we'll have an interesting discussion.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. For everybody watching at home, thanks for taking the time out of your evenings to listen to this discussion that we're having now. To the people in the audience, is anyone a designer? Anyone an artist? Okay, we have three, great. The other ones, art lovers, design lovers. If any questions arise during the discussion, please maybe make a note of them or remember them. And if we have time at the end, we can get to your questions and answer them, or have our panel of experts answer them for you. So what we are talking about today is design residencies, a space for new perspectives. So for those uninitiated, an international residency program is a space for artists, designers, and architects to explore different cultures in specific places that will foster new inspiration for them, often allowing them to find new perspectives by living in a stimulating environment, free from economic restrictions, to really allow them to explore their art in a new way and create a cross-cultural exchange. So our panelists tonight, I'm very excited to introduce to you, are Alice Lichtenstein, the curator of Schloss Holleneck. We have Christoph Meyer, artist, sculptor, and architect. And joining us from remotely from Finland, praise be to the technology that allows us to do that, is Hanna-Kaisa Korolainen, an artist based in textiles, ceramics, and glass. So before we get to know our panelists individually, I just want to briefly open up the floor to all of them to discuss the residency program as a concept in general. So maybe let's first start by defining what even is the function of a residency program, how does it work, and who organizes it? So maybe Alicia, maybe you want to take this.
Yeah, I think what you said before is it's really the most important thing that you said was about freed from economic restrictions. Yeah? And I think that's was very much a point which was important for me when we started the residency program, was to give space to designers, which usually have to always deal with, the budget, the problem of finding a production partner, to just let them really do their work without having to worry about making something that was going to be suitable for the market. So really giving them the time to research. And I still think that's the most important aspect of a residency, is just having this freedom to just work and research an idea and be creative in an unrestricted way. So I think that's very important.
Great, yeah, the arts have to be funded somehow.
Yeah.
Who's eligible? How do you apply? How do you get in?
Well, in Schloss Holleneck, we are really one of the few residencies that is really aimed at designers. So there are a lot of residencies that are aimed at artists or architects or just open to creative people. And we've decided to really specialize in designers. We aim to have what is called emerging designers. So we try and give precedence to fairly young designers. They might have had a few successes, have had some experience, but they need a space, a little bit more space to just experiment, try something out. Until last year was an invitation only. This year was the first year when we've had an open call. And now it's a little bit of a mixture. So I think the personal aspect is still very important. So I like to choose people with whom I get on with, because also they live with us. They are very much part of the family for the period that they're there. And I think it's important to have a good dialogue. Yeah? But obviously it goes on the merit of the work as well.
Okay. So Christoph, how did that work for you? How did you get into your residency program?
Well, for long I didn't have the balls to apply for these kind of things, because let's say the chances would be relatively low that you would get it from the perspective of the artist, and then also the ways how you enter or how you apply to them are sometimes relatively, and I'm mainly speaking about those ones that you can apply. But those where you apply, you need to apply with the project, and then you're in a high competition. And but then through the years, maybe I was thinking easier about what kind of applications I could write, catching, the moment when a jury comes together and something has to pop out of the masses. But I totally agree with what you said. I believe it is a disconnection from standard life situations and a complete change of wallpaper. You're thrown into a completely new environment, and I personally only did very far residencies for that purpose. And well, you also bring something, and that's, I believe, the other part of the residency program.
Great. And Hannah Kaiser, what was the process of applying like to you? How did you come to Schloss Holleneck?
Actually, I was contacted by Alice, and I assumed that she contacted some people from Finland that she was interested in, and then I sent some kind of proposition, like she sent me some kind of guideline of what would be the theme for this year, and asked me to write about how would I approach this theme. And then we had an interview, and it was quite simple actually. Much more easier than funding applications that
Great.
every month here.
It's great that this program exists in order to allow artists to create so freely. One thing that's still, I guess, a concern though is sustainable working conditions, especially when it comes to a short-term period. How do you ensure that is all taken care of?
What would you consider as sustainable working conditions?
Well, I mean, I guess that all depends on somebody's personal definition of sustainability. But in terms of working conditions, it would be, I suppose, to have flexibility in terms of time to yourself, and also a livability that's high, and to have a good standard of livability.
So I think what's important to say is, first of all, our residency, because it is aimed at designers, is relatively short. Most artist residencies are probably several months. People who come and stay in Holleneck usually stay about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's fairly short, yeah. And the kind of work that we do while we're in Hollenig, it's only the conceptual part. So the designers then go back home and they carry on the project, and then we carry on working together, finding production partners. So with Hannah Kaiser, it's sending emails backwards and forwards. What I like to say is that they come and stay for 2 or 3 weeks, but it's a kind of a mentorship program for a year. Yeah. So I think that makes it a little bit different from the more standard residency. Obviously, because it's such a short time, it's super compact. It's quite intense, and this year was the first year where we had all the designers in residence at the same time, which worked, I think, very well. It was a lot of fun as well, and there were a lot of ideas bouncing from each other. So it was more like a designer summer camp, I guess.
Okay, well, that's lovely. I suppose that counts as a sustainable working environment.
Yeah, I guess also the fact that you spend, I mean, this sounds silly, but the fact that you spend a lot of time like preparing food and eating together and having activities together, it's a way of getting out ideas and getting to know each other, which makes the setting a lot more relaxed. So I think everyone felt very much at ease, and everyone can then express themselves better. Yeah. So I hope. How did you feel about it, Hannah Kaiser?
I mean, one of the things that I was looking forward was to get to know other designers from other countries and people I didn't know previously, and get to know their practice, but also then connecting with people, and that was really lovely. I think we had a really wonderful group of people this year, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them again next spring.
So while we're on the subject of a residency at Schloss Hollenig, let's just get started. With you giving us some background on the basic idea, on how it works. It's not unusual to have exhibitions and galleries that focus on contemporary art in a major city or in bigger cities such as Vienna. It's quite unusual, I suppose, to see contemporary art in a small town such as Hollenig, which is, I think, a 3-hour ride from Vienna. It's just 4 hours from Venice, where you're from originally. So to come in there and create a space for contemporary art, how did that come about? And give us some background.
We actually decided to move to Hollenig about 6 years ago, and what I noticed when we moved there was, on one side, how important the castle was for the community living around there. Like, they really identified with the history of the place. They felt really proud of it. So the first desire was, how can we open up the place at least once a year so that the people who live in the area, the people that live in the area actually can, enjoy it. And the second thing that I realized was that it was a kind of treasure trove of all sorts of objects and crafts, and there's furniture and there's art and there's porcelain and there's glass. And suddenly, I was going through the rooms and I was like, you just go crazy with, the amount of stuff that there is and that you can get inspired from. And the difference, obviously, with a more, structured museum is you can actually touch everything, It's, it's like, hold it, move it around, So it feels a lot like home as well at the same time. And then, as it often happens, two people who don't know each other and kind of not connected, they both said, oh, well, now that you're living in Hollenig, you can have, artists in residence. And I was like, actually, no, now that I live in Hollenig, I can have designers in residence, because I've worked in design all my life. And it happened that soon after that, I was with Katarina and Thomas, Misha Traxler, and I asked them if they thought, would you come to Hollenig for a designer in residency program? And they were like going, yeah, sure, why not? And suddenly I was like, oh, okay, if they're going to do it, then I'm sure there are other people who want to do it. And honestly, I didn't know what I was getting myself into, because otherwise I probably would have not done it. But I'm so happy I did. So I started without really knowing what was going to become of it. And it's still constantly changing. So I think there's a flexibility that we have in developing the program and changing the format and adapting it year after year.
Well, you've certainly made a great splash in the design world. I think internationally you've received a lot of attention and acclaim for the project. As you mentioned, you focus on designers, and specifically young designers, to come and contribute new pieces around an annual theme.
Yeah.
So what themes have you done thus far?
So the first theme was slow. So I was trying to give the slowness a positive understanding. It's always like if you're slow, it's kind of negative. And the first exhibition was really like, okay, let's slow down, let's take a breath. Let's, if you walk into a castle, suddenly there's a different tempo than, if you're in the city. The second exhibition was Morphosis, and it was all about constant change, how things are never in a standstill position, and even if they look like they've been like that forever, there's always like very small changes happening constantly. The third year was about legacy, so what we want to leave behind, what we have inherited. So it's this kind of like, the values, the morals that we pass on. And then last year we had Ad Mensam, so it was all about the table and how we sit at a table to actually have a conversation. Food is just an excuse. And this year was Walden. So this year we actually had the exhibition pretty much ready by the time lockdown came. So it was only digital. And we had live streaming, we had videos, we had a 3D tour, and it was all about how do you bring a bit of wilderness in everyday life, and how can you combine the inside and the outside, the natural world with the artificial. And we actually have a part of Walden here in Vienna, the Vienna Design Week, under the name Naturfilia, because we've collaborated with Michel Daxler. So together we're presenting some of the pieces from their latest work and from the Walden exhibition.
Is there a website that people in the audience or the people watching from home can go to see a documentation of everything that you've done?
We actually have a pretty updated website. It's called schlosshollenig.at for Austria, and you can still see all of Walden on it, and there's a lot of images and text from the past exhibitions. So yeah.
Great. So after this, you can go straight to
do
Schloss Holleneck virtually.
Tour. Yeah, of the castle. Yeah.
Great. So let's move right on to Hannah Kaiser. You participated in this year's residency program. You are a designer with a focus on textiles, ceramics, and glass. How did you specialize in those in that field, and what were some of your fondest projects so far?
Well, it has been like I think I'm quite restless because I have done a lot of things. Actually, I have both like education for art and design. I did photography in art school. I did also video and installation. And then I worked for many years in Paris and Brussels in fashion, and that's the time I started to design textiles as well. So then I decided to do a design major in textile design and textile art. And later I got pretty bored just doing textiles because I think they were just too soft by itself and too matte. I mean, they can be shiny, but I worked a lot with mohair and wool and also silk. But so then I also wanted to learn new skills, so I started to do ceramics, and it was really fun. And then 1 year after starting to do ceramics, I started to do glass. And I think that I do a lot of work with craft. I use a lot of my hands, a lot of like handicrafts. And then when I work with glass, of course, I mean, I don't know how to blow glass. I'm a very bad assistant in glass, but I mean, I do warm the colors and help the glass blower or disturb him. But I worked a long time with a amazing glass blower from Finland, Jonas Lapsa. And the best moment is working with him, because you have to be in glass studio. You have to be synchronized, and you have to learn to understand like what the other person thinks, and it's kind of this kind of collaboration, or somehow we have like a shared responsibility and a shared maybe ownership also over the artwork. There's like things that I will bring to it. I have to design, and I design the colors and things like that. But then the blower has a lot of like a signature because he's doing the handwork somehow. So that's pretty fascinating. And then sometimes with the complex projects, we have other assistants that come, and then we're like a little group of people.
You also collaborated with Marimekko, if I'm correct, right? I think that's probably the biggest Finnish name internationally. You also have Marimekko in several stores in Vienna. Was that a very meaningful experience for you? I mean, as far as I understand, for Finland, Marimekko is quite the heritage brand.
Yes,
you got to contribute.
That was a few years ago. It was actually a dream of mine. It's a dream probably of every child who's interested in art and design. So it's a very young age, and it lasted for a few years. It was a lot of fun, and it's exactly this kind of this heritage and this legacy that Marimekko has in the Finnish culture, and even like inside of like a lot of my aesthetics come from there. I think somehow it's part of my DNA. So it was a lovely experience, and also I got to meet so many wonderful designers and people from there that are still my friends. So it's kind of a community that I got from that. But later I wasn't so interested in doing that kind of commercial work for bigger markets, because Marimekko was kind of like really growing fast. So I have been selecting maybe a little bit different projects.
Well, it's almost like a full circle moment. You got to give back to a place that inspired you, and then you moved on to other things and to other textures and mediums. That's quite lovely. So you did the residency at Schloss Holleneck this year, as we've heard. How has that shaped your work as a designer, as an artist, your trajectory in your career? What have you taken from that influenced you in some way?
There was some problem with the. Sorry.
I'll repeat the question. How has the residency program at Schloss Holleneck influenced your trajectory and your work as a designer and as an artist? What have you taken from that?
Yes, thank you. It was really wonderful because I'm also working with my PhD. It's my last year, 5th year. I'm writing at the moment. And my topic is sources of inspiration. I have a lot of things from 19th century until 1960s, different phenomena and different artists, and also places. And Holleneck is kind of like, normally the sources of inspiration, you look at them from the outside, and it kind of detect things that is kind of like overwhelming situation when you actually go inside of the thing, and it's all around you. And at first, it was actually like there's too many things, and you kind of panic because you get so inspired by everything, and it's kind of it's hard to kind of like keep make sense of it. And so what I want to say to really answer the question, I think it's things that I would find things that kind of are already in my aesthetics. Like I was interested in Asian aesthetics. Basically whatever, like if you like a certain era or certain things, you can find everything in Holleneck. So of course I reflected, but then it's kind of incredible that they are there in real. So I gained a lot of inspiration, and also somehow being consciously in dialogue with the place that we were supposed to get inspired by, and then produce artworks. It's kind of like me to realize my creative processes and my aesthetics maybe differently. So it's a long answer. A lot of things. I think I have to process a lot of things. I have a whole list of also things that I want to ask from Alice later, and I want to go back and see. And so it's a big story, and it's hard to say now because in general, when I get inspired by something, I work with the same theme at least for 18 to 20 months. That's the way I work. I repeat and repeat, and I sketch and think. So I have only hints now. You have to ask me again next year.
Great, I will make a note of that, and we'll do that in some form. So, Christoph, you come from a very different background, actually. You're a sculptural artist by way of architecture. So, you were part of a residency at the Mack Center of Art and Architecture in Los Angeles, and the big work that came out of it was a project I believe was called Los Bar, a replica of the famous Adolf Loos in Vienna. Would you like to enlighten us on that project a little bit? Give us some insights and background.
Well, it was one of those moments. I applied basically for this residency, coming back to this previous discussion, I think 10 times. And in 12 years, 2 times I just forgot about it. And it was this one year when I thought like, oh, Schindler residency application deadline today. And so I really pulled something together which was, easy, without too much doubts and skepticism about it. And then I went there, I got it, and I went there, and it was 5.5 months officially. And it was really, it literally changed my life, all those residencies always did. And I had the good luck to meet with 3 other people there that, let's say, had the same vibes. The MAC Center in Los Angeles is a dependance of the MAC Museum from Vienna. And in the 90s, they purchased houses or got houses donated by Rudolf Schindler, a teacher by Adolf Loos. And they were you could basically hear everything from the others. So I was lucky, let's say, to meet with those people that were not too wild or wild enough or had the same wildness like I had. And one night in late April, we figured out that the garage back doors that we were supposed to share as a studio had the exact same length and the exact just the exact length like the American bar by Adolf Loos in Vienna, but was squeezed in width and in height by 33%. And that was driving us so crazy, maybe we were a bit too drunk.
I was about to say, how many years we have
it was so crazy that we said, like, well, it's reason enough to copy the American bar in the, let's say, small dependance of the MAC. Well, it went very well. It was somehow surprised us. And all the others were free to join the idea and just cancel whatever they had planned to do there. We had 3-4 really good months.
And I saw some pictures on your website. Did you set it on fire afterwards?
Well, of course, let's say our hosts, the MAC, was they do this since years. There were so many people sent from Austria and all over the world to do this residency, and I can highly recommend it to everybody. Keep applying. But I think they've seen a lot, and they, let's say, were at some point tired, but they were also at some point very excited. So in the end, we asked if we were not allowed to do it, and we did it anyway. Then they saw it, and they were excited. Then the neighbors slowly got upset. And then somehow we had to get rid of it. And the fact we didn't want to put it in a suitcase or chop it in parts. We really were looking for the right, let's say, final chapter of this whole series of Fridays, where every Friday was an answer to the previous one. And therefore we decided there were a lot of people coming regularly. One of them was a guy that had property in Wonder Valley, and he said, like, well, let's bring it to my place. And then we decided to make the Lost Bar Festival as a bit of a Mickey Mouse version of the Burning Man Festival. And literally everybody who performed there, everybody that was hanging out during these months in Lost Bar joined us, and everybody got crazy that night, and in the end we burned it down.
If you have to get rid of an art piece, you may as well burn to pieces.
yeah, exactly.
How many residencies have you done in total?
I would say I'm not one of those artists that do residency hoppings, but I did 3 to 4. As I said, this one in Los Angeles was relatively long and was relatively far. I also went to Tokyo for 4 months residency, and then various versions in shorter, a bit comparable with yours, in Italy and in Brussels, and in more of a private situation. But I always let enough time in between to not to again arrive back home and to get back into these comforts and into stress and into all these addictions, and then have again this moment to chop everything off.
But you also need to digest what you've kind of
Exactly.
what you come back with. So I think
Exactly.
you need a gap in between to actually produce more of what you've collected.
The best of returning from Tokyo in a lot of good reasons, but it was to come back and get shocked.
I guess it's a culture shock going there, and probably also
Another
culture
The
shock
way
coming
there
back.
was with excitement, the way in return was more like, we are shocked.
Wow. How often could you apply for the same residency? Could you apply twice if you have some time in between and say, I want to go back and do it again? Or is it limited to just once per artist?
So in Holinek, it's like you do the residency once. But I have to say, I've become very good friends with a lot of the designers that have been designers in residence. So they do tend to come back. Sometimes they come back to do other kind of projects. Sometimes they come back to spend holidays with us. So sometimes they come back for a birthday party. So I think we really build a relationship. Yeah? I mean, honestly, not with everyone. But with a lot of them. So what I do say is Holinek is a welcoming place. It's one of those places that it's miserable without people. You need to fill it up with people. So all the designers that, even if they have been designers in residence only once, they're always very welcome back. So, yeah.
Great. So people apply. Christoph, you work as an artist now, as we said, but you didn't get a proper education in art, in architecture. But you don't.
I did both.
Okay.
Overlapping. I always say I slipped into the arts, but I'm coming from an architectural background. I studied architecture, and now I'm still teaching architects at the TU Wien, but in a department which is the so-called Arts and Design department, which really has this tradition to come out of the arts since the beginning of since basically the faculty is existing.
Is your art heavily inspired by architecture, or are you going away from that?
Let's say the structural idea around architecture, the fact that you donate it somehow to someone else, the fact that you deal with more than 3 dimensions, I always say, was so imprinted into my thinking already that when I started sculpture studies, that it was hard to get rid of it anymore. So I carried the architectural idea into the sculptural practice that I'm having now.
And how have these residencies that you've partaken in influenced your art?
Well, as I said before, just by the fact that they were always relatively long, there's no way around them that you just come home and you forget about it. That's not the case. You need to get your directions if you're far away and if you're in a completely new context. And with this, you get new experiences and new friends, new networks, and they were always following up projects out of this. One project you mentioned in Los Angeles was continuing in several other places as various new chapters in, let's say, this play or whatever you call it, this multi-dimensional project. Till last year it was part of the Wiener Fest walking, and it started growing, and also the Tokyo residency that I did has still an impact, and I'm still working on ways to get back, but Corona and the pandemics just crossed my way.
Yeah, I suppose. Are you planning to apply for any residencies in the near or far future?
Maybe at Holinek if that goes so well, what I hear, but at the moment I haven't considered it. I mean, at the moment we all do a bit of a residency at home, or just, well, I can highly recommend everybody to consider it. One's life and family situations and also financial backgrounds allow it. The circumstances have to fit, but it is always good to get away or get around.
And how did you deal with Corona? What was different this year? How did you adapt?
We didn't know if we were going to be able. We were actually lucky because the residency was planned for the end of July, which was actually probably the calmest period in this last year craziness, yeah. So I think if we had planned it at a different time, it probably wouldn't have happened. But we were lucky in that sense. It's also true though that we only had European designers this time.
Oh, so, you usually have people from...
yes, so the last 2 years we've had people from the States. This year we were meant to be having someone coming from Morocco and someone coming from the States again. They obviously weren't able to come. And we were meant to have a girl from Singapore as well. So that obviously didn't happen.
Did you give these spots to other designers instead? Yeah.
So we had more people close at home, which was also amazing. So
well, I guess there's more of a European perspective than in that sense. You can
it was just a bit of a shame because we've tried to move out of the European perspective and to try and be a little bit more international. And the year that we really tried to go out, we were actually then forced back in. So, but I mean, what was very different this year is that it was the first year that we've done an open call. And we did the open call in January, and we had a fairly good number of applications. It wasn't too many, but the level was extremely high. And I've been on a lot of juries from other competitions, and I was amazed by the quality of the work that was submitted. Because I was like, oh, I could have that one, and I could have that one, and I could have that one. So I was like, wow. And I felt, well, that means that we're communicating the kind of work that we want to do really well in a way, and that people we have an own style, and people kind of know what to expect. It made it really hard to decide who to choose. So it wasn't like we had to then opt out for a plan B. It was just there was a lot of really good people this year that could have come.
Well, fortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Are you planning for next year, or are you a little bit cautious at the moment?
It's a little bit difficult. So I want to carry on working. So we're all, we're working with Hannah Kaiser. We're looking for production partners. We're working with the other designers to look for production partners. It is a little bit slower than it normally is, the whole process. I think it's a question of trying to adapt and finding new ways of getting around things. So the same way that Walden just went online, we still had the exhibition. Schloss Hollenig was still a platform to promote designers. It's just that people didn't come and they just saw it online. It's not quite the same, but at least I felt that we were being true to our mission, and I think it's just a question for 2021 to find out what is the best format to support our designers. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Hannah Kaiser, how are you doing in Finland right now? What's the situation?
Well, I'm teaching in university, and the situation is now that they want everybody to be present. And contrary to last spring when we locked down and everything was remoted. So I was so happy to wear lipstick on Zoom because now I'm wearing a mask. Of course, I'm teaching without a mask, but well, the situation is similar as everywhere. The cases are little by little something is closed, like restaurants are closing earlier and bars are closing. Well, same story as everywhere. A lot of students are remoted. A lot of people work from home. And actually, I'm quite lucky to be able to go to work at the moment. It's nice to be with people.
Yeah.
Are you all seeing, I guess this goes out to everybody, are you all seeing an influence that COVID is having in terms of design and the work that's being produced? Is there an overall movement a little bit? Is that reflected?
It's quite horrible because I've had a year with many exhibitions this year, and I have still several to come. And for example, I've never had as little press as this year, and I've seen in newspapers they write much less about design and art. And we have some documentaries we were supposed to do, but it can't be done because people can't can't access to premises. It's just like everywhere else. Like everything is like half cancelled, and I would have preferred kind of like take a year off and just like do things remotely. But at the same time, of course, it's good to continue. But I think it's everywhere, and a lot of people who are like going to residencies in Japan or to States, or they can't go basically. So. Because people here in Finland, of course, it's a super small scene here, so people do travel a lot for design and art.
One thing that I think we've all been able to observe is this attention that people are paying, though, to their homes and to the way that they live. Has that inspired more of an interest in purchasing art as well? Has that lit a fire in the art market a little bit for people to really invest in art? Or is that maybe too soon to tell?
Well, I know from a friend of mine who's an art consultant and art dealer. And she says she's never sold as much as she has in the last 6 months, mainly because people have the time to listen to her, and she's not competing with all the other galleries at the fairs. So she says it's been amazing. It's been a lot more work, in a way, like she has to push herself more, but it's going really well. I mean, I'm not in the market business so much, so I don't know. I find it hard to say. I just know what a few people. I think it really depends on who your clients are, and but there's definitely a lot more attention for the home and how you decorate your home, and people are making an investment because they're spending so much time at home. So
yeah, I believe the next years will be showing what finally comes out of this situation. At the moment, I think you can't tell. I mean, Austria is at the moment covered with cash. They throw in money into every creative branch, not all of them, and apparently should too little. And they should continue. But I think the next years will be tough, and especially also for institutions. If tourists are not returning, there will be, let's say, alerted situations, and also that will affect local scenes if there's no activity, and then this will delay into or will create a delay into the arts market, or so to say, because the scene and the environment of a city like Vienna is not lively. Why should somebody come here and buy art, or buy art anyway? Because it is a very social moment when you buy art. Therefore, I personally also don't believe very much in the digital, let's say, environments of buying art, because most of the people know what an art fair is about. It's seeing and being seen, and being the first one that says yes. And yeah, we will see what the next years bring.
I think you said something which is important. I think there's a kind of a delay in the whole situation. So I think it's very hard. We're kind of all a little bit on standby. So we're still acting as if it was 2 months ago, and 2 months ago we were acting like if it had been 4 months ago, or maybe even more. So I think it's going to take a while. But the social aspect is it's something which is very important, I think, in all the creative jobs, and that's something that we really need to find a way of compensating in some other way.
Do you think that after this Corona period now, once the pandemic is over, that the international residencies will thrive a little more, that we'll see more of them, that people will want to host more, will want to partake more? I have the impression that things will be much more at a local level. Like, I can see it already. Like, this year I work a lot abroad, and I think and people who are abroad are happy to come here, and I'm happy to travel. And this year was the first year where actually my photographer was Austrian, the filmmaker was Austrian. I had more designers that were Austrian. I worked a lot more with the people who were local. And in the past years, I wouldn't have done that because
I was more curious about what was happening abroad, because the locals were too expensive, because the locals were going abroad to work. So suddenly it was like, the locals are here and they are available and they're giving me Corona discounts. And why not work with them, yeah? And suddenly it was like, oh, look, there's lots of really good people just on my doorstep. And I think everyone is doing a little bit that. So I'm hopeful that we'll just realize that there are enough good people around here and that we can, have access to them instead of always looking abroad.
I personally hope and seriously hope that this will not be, subject of savings. Let's say fundings will be reduced on that field, because it would just narrow every kind of local scene or just discourse on a global level. But what came to my mind now is, and what's maybe also nice to mention is that a city like Vienna is also bringing people from abroad to Vienna without having a primarily, a success out of it or in any form. It's just, let's say, a sustainable thinking to bring somebody and hopefully make him or her return back to this town on a later date or put a spotlight on it. And that brings also a lot of profit for those people that are based here. I literally had positive aspects for myself and my own practice and my own career just from other artists that did residencies here. So therefore I really hope this idea about a residency is not topic of savings and it's just even more used and even more, of course, always with the background of living on a planet that is bleeding, but it has to be a compromise, let's say.
So what you're saying is that art in itself is a tourism factor as well, and that as such it should always be funded. If you look at the numbers of the museums and if you hear what the museum directors say in the interviews, at these days, then you know that the arts is massively supported or financed by tourism. And it is not just a side branch of tourism as some parties might think. But also the arts itself, the scene itself is totally also, let's say, a business branch which is bringing money from A to B, and so they're also investing in it. Great. So I suppose maybe we should take the time that we have left to take some questions or comments from the audience. Let's first approach the live audience here. Does anybody have anything to ask our experts on the panel? Or do we maybe have some comments from people watching at home?
I have a question, but I think just everyone knows, if you have a question, come to the front so that the people in the street can also hear you. What I'm interested in is this, because this is something that for Vienna Design, as we travel to different locations every year, there's this site-specific nature is always a huge topic. As is with the residencies in Holleneck, where the designers always take up a certain element that is there, or discover a new room or discover a new aspect of the history, as was with the garage in LA, where as something as trivial as the measurement could trigger a creative process. That project then went on to other spaces where the site-specific nature was kind of transformed, and also now the exhibition in Holleneck has traveled to Vienna, of course, where everyone should have a look at it. I'm interested in that because we, of course, did the Passionswege exhibition this year, where we took these objects that were made to be displayed in the workshops of the craftspeople. That made a lot of sense in those spaces, because they told a story about how the designers came to get to know these processes and these places and these people. Now we've taken them to a completely different setting, and we've kind of made this very anonymous almost or neutral backdrop, and the objects all of a sudden work in a very different way. They've become luxury items instead of being the sort of testament of a collaborative process. So I was wondering how anyone on the panel might see this, taking things that have been created in a residency on a very specific location and taking them somewhere else, or is that a good idea? Is that maybe even necessary? Or is that something that you shouldn't really do?
Well, we're preparing an exhibition for 2021, which is that theme exactly, displacement. So, I think your comment is extremely interesting. It's like, how does an object have a meaning in context, and what meaning does it have once you take it out of the context? I think there is no non-context. So even the objects, as you describe them, in a kind of very white and very kind of disinfected environment, I think they just acquire a different meaning. Yeah? So I think I'm a strong believer of contextualizing objects and giving them the background and giving them the history. But I think if an object is good and it's well made and there's a thought process behind it, it will acquire different meanings depending on how it's positioned and also, you know, what other objects are next to it. I think what you said about the objects becoming luxury items is because they're next to each other. If there was just one on a neutral background, maybe that luxury item aspect wouldn't have been so strong. So I think it's not just the context, it's the context, the non-context, and the conversation between the objects. But I think Gabriel will need to have a deeper conversation on this in preparation for next year.
Because do you think that the Lost Bar would have the same effect in Vienna as it did in Los Angeles?
I have to confess, audiences are terribly different, and every audience reacted to the project completely different, and that was the great part of it, because whatever they brought in, we transformed to a new and I honestly believe that residencies have this great positive aspect of that you can bring something from a completely different context and bring it here, and it even creates a bigger aha effect here than as it might have created in the other location.
Well, I think that's... Hannah, did you want to say?
Oh,
yeah, yes, please.
For this year, this made me think about this idea of Walter Benjamin's aura. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He was kind of like, well, the text, of course, was written in 1930s about the cinema and the photography and the reproduction of things, and it has a set stance, so it would be different if it was written today. But even though he was kind of like arguing that artworks have an aura in the place that they have been created, and they should stay there because they come somehow like, and they should be seen uniquely and not in reproduction and all this. So I was kind of like thinking like this, it just seems really outdated for me. I mean, I believe that everything can be displaced. Of course, it's the ways and the motivations and maybe ethics of how we displace things. And I mean, like part of the Holonet now is here in Finland with me. And things also, it's not an exchange that goes in one direction, but things are, when they're displaced, they will still carry their original like inspiration or meaning or a dialogue. It's just like different dialogues and interactions with people and with places, and I think that's like super important. It's like what makes us more human and understand everything. Okay, I'm not gonna go further.
Well, I think I speak for all of us. I think I speak for all of us if I say that now we are extremely excited to see how displacement factors into the arts next year at Holonet, and that everything will go off as normal as we're used to it. Thank you to our audience for coming out here in person, for taking the trip to join us here, and for everybody watching from home, thank you so much for taking the time out and for listening to our, as I would say, enlightening discussion on residency programs. My name is Philip Rossmann. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to the panel, Alice, Christoph, and Hannah Kaiser, for your insight. And have a lovely evening and good night.